You're more than a viewer here. You're walking this road with me. Hit subscribe and let's hit 1,000 together. That's our win, not just mine. Most people spend their entire lives concealing who they really are. I hid mine for 3 full years. Not out of shame, never that. I stayed quiet because the people whose opinion mattered most to me would have seen me differently, and that scared me more than any operation I ever ran. I'm Mara. The night my younger sister Chelsea was supposed to be celebrating her engagement, the night that should have been pure joy, turned into the moment my carefully buried truth came undone, right in front of everyone who mattered. If your own family has ever made you feel small, stick with me. What unfolded in that room didn't just change my life. It shifted something for every single person standing in it. Chelsea was always the sun in our family. I was the moon, content orbiting in the background. She was the one our parents showed off at gatherings, the charming one, the one with the easy smile and the impressive stories. I was the quieter sibling, the one who'd vanish for stretches of weeks, then reappear with vague answers and a closed expression. When relatives asked what I did, I'd shrug and say, logistics, government contracts, pretty boring stuff. Everyone bought it, my parents, my co-workers, even Chelsea. The reality sat behind clearance walls I wasn't permitted to crack open. Not for family, not for my closest friends. For 3 years, I'd been part of an elite rescue and recovery outfit, the group that rolled in when everything else had failed. No badges, no press coverage. When the media reported on jobs we wrapped, they credited a single name to the whole squad, the Blizzard unit. And I ran it. At home, though, I was just Mara, the daughter with the forgettable desk job, the sister who never had a headline worth repeating. Then Chelsea got engaged to Derek, a Navy SEAL captain. Decorated, respected. The kind of man who makes a room sit up a little taller when he walks through the door. Chelsea couldn't shut up about him. And she couldn't resist pointing out, over and over, how different our paths had become. The engagement party was at my parents' place. 50 guests, twinkle lights strung overhead, a live band playing. Chelsea drifted through the crowd in a flowing white dress like she'd already made it to the altar. I showed up solo, wearing a plain navy dress, hoping to fade into the walls the way I'd perfected at every family function for the past 3 years. That's when Chelsea intercepted me. Her grip on my arm was a little too firm. Listen, she murmured, glancing behind her to check who was listening. Tonight matters. Derek's commanding officers are here. His whole crew is here. Do not bring up your job. Tell people you're between gigs or whatever. He values strength. He respects people who've actually done something impressive. I don't need you embarrassing us in front of... She let the sentence hang. The rest didn't need saying. Keep your low-rent job out of his sight, she added under her breath, tugging at my collar like she was styling a mannequin rather than straightening her sister. My fiancé is a SEAL captain. He can't stand people with nothing to show for themselves. I kept my mouth shut. I nodded. I drifted into the corner, which was honestly the only move I knew at family events these past 3 years. Some guests nearby had caught her words. They chuckled, not viciously, but easily, the way people laugh when they've already written someone off and assumed nobody would bother defending them. Heat climbed up my cheeks. I didn't push back. I never did. What was the alternative? Spill the details of assignments Derek himself wouldn't have clearance to hear about. Impossible. The rules existed for reasons that mattered deeply, so I stood, glass of lemonade in hand, practically invisible in a room full of people who all thought they'd already figured me out. Around 9, Derek walked in with 3 other men, each in full dress uniform. The entire room recalibrated the second they appeared, postures tightened, mid-sentence conversations froze. Chelsea practically sprinted across the floor to loop her arm through his, grinning like she'd just claimed a trophy. Derek moved through the crowd with ease, warm handshakes for my parents, polite nods for uncles and cousins. Polished, assured, exactly the vision Chelsea had always pictured marrying. Eventually, Chelsea steered him my direction, toward the corner where I'd planted myself. And this, she announced with a polished little laugh, is my sister Mara. She works in logistics. Pretty uneventful stuff. Derek smiled politely and stuck out his hand. Good to meet you. Good to meet you too, I replied. That should have been the whole interaction. A formal handshake, a forgettable intro, the kind of moment everyone forgets by 11 o'clock. Except Derek didn't release my hand. His gaze traveled across my face, and something behind his eyes changed. First confusion, then recognition, then something close to alarm. His smile evaporated completely. Wait, he said softly, almost to himself. Hold on. Chelsea let out a nervous laugh. Derek, everything okay? He wasn't hearing her. He was staring at me the way you stare at someone you'd been told was folklore, not a real person standing right in front of you, lemonade and all. The champagne glass in his other hand tilted, then slipped, smashing against the floor. The band kept playing, but half the room had already turned to watch. Derek's voice came out barely louder than a breath. Dear God, he said, it's the Blizzard hero. The room went silent in a way no family gathering of mine had ever managed. All 50 conversations stopped mid-word. Chelsea blinked at him. The what? Derek, what are you even saying? Derek didn't answer her yet. He was still locked on me, and now his 3 teammates had drifted closer too, their expressions cycling from confusion to shock. 3 years ago, Derek began, voice unsteady, my unit got pinned during a joint operation in a mountainous zone, right in the middle of a whiteout. Radios were dead. We had 2 guys critically wounded and 0 ways out. We figured that was it for all of us. He swallowed. A specialized recovery crew rolled in through conditions everyone said were unsurvivable. They evacuated all 6 of us alive. We never got a look at their faces. Command never released names. The only thing we ever knew was the call sign of the person who ran that extraction. He looked at me like he was trying to convince himself he wasn't dreaming. Blizzard 1. The room was completely still now. My parents had stopped moving. Chelsea's mouth hung slightly open, her hand still resting on Derek's arm like she was clinging to something that had already slipped out of her grip. I've got a photograph, Derek went on, his voice cracking. Command handed it to me a while back, after enough time had passed to allow some of it to be declassified, strictly for internal recognition. A single image of the person who pulled my team out. I've carried it in my wallet for 3 years. He reached into his jacket with shaking fingers and pulled out his wallet. Inside was a small, creased photo. Me, in full gear, standing in knee-deep snow mid-extraction. 3 years younger, half frozen, but unmistakably me. Derek looked up. You saved my life. You saved all our lives. And I've been carrying your picture around for 3 years, wondering if I'd ever get the chance to say thank you. Chelsea had gone completely pale. She looked at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo like her brain couldn't line up the sister she'd dismissed her whole life with the woman Derek was describing. That's not possible, she whispered. Mara does logistics. She's never even mentioned. Because I couldn't, I said quietly, finally speaking up. My voice was steady, but each word landed like a small, deliberate weight. Everything I did was classified. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell anyone. Not because I didn't trust you, Chelsea. Because the rules didn't allow it. Derek was still staring at me, visibly emotional now. You led that extraction. You carried Petty Officer Ramirez 2 miles through a whiteout after he collapsed. I heard it from command years later. They called you. They called our unit the Blizzard Unit, I said. That's all anyone needed to know. One of Derek's teammates stepped forward, voice thick. We toasted you every anniversary of that mission. Every single year. We didn't even know your name. The room, which had been laughing at me an hour earlier, was now completely motionless, gazing at me with an expression I'd never once in my life seen aimed my way. Genuine respect. Chelsea stood frozen, the champagne in her own glass forgotten, her engagement party quietly reshaping itself into something she'd never imagined. Mara, she said, her voice small. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because you never asked, I said gently. You just assumed you already knew the answer. Let me be clear about something. I didn't go to that party with any plan for revenge. I didn't orchestrate any of this. I never wanted the spotlight. But sometimes the truth doesn't wait for a convenient moment. Sometimes it walks in exactly when it's needed, standing right in front of the people who most need to hear it. Derek asked if he could formally thank me in front of everyone. Out of respect for him and his team, I agreed. He laid it out carefully, never revealing anything classified, explaining that the operation I'd led had pulled 6 men out alive. Men who now had families, kids, whole futures that only existed because a crew no one ever toasted had walked into impossible conditions and gotten the job done. My parents, who'd quietly spent years worried I'd never found my footing, sat there absorbing 3 years of unannounced sacrifice in the space of about 10 minutes. Chelsea didn't say much the rest of the night. Later, near the end of the party, she found me standing alone by the drink table. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time in a long stretch, she actually meant it. "I spent years assuming I was ahead of you. Turns out I didn't know the first thing about where you actually were." "You didn't know because I made sure you couldn't," I said. "That's not on you. But maybe next time, don't decide someone is unimpressive just because their life looks quiet." She nodded slowly. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, my sister looked at me like she actually saw me. Here's what I've taken away from all of it. The loudest voices in the room aren't always the strongest ones. Sometimes the person tucked into the corner has quietly carried more weight than anyone else in the building. We're all too quick to size people up by what shows up on the surface. A job title, a confident tone of voice, a dress that costs more than somebody else's monthly groceries. But real grit is rarely loud. Real sacrifice rarely comes with an announcement. Some of the most vital work on this planet is done by people who'll never get the chance to explain themselves, never get a parade, never get the credit. They just shoulder the load in silence because the work demands it. So the next time you're tempted to shrug someone off as small, unimpressive, or beneath you, pause. You might be standing next to someone who's already given more than you'll ever know. And if you're the quiet one in the corner, holding your own secret, your own sacrifice, your own story nobody else understands, hear me out. The truth doesn't need your permission to surface. And when it does, it'll speak louder than anyone who ever doubted you. Thanks for spending this time with me. If this story hit you somewhere, please like, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who needs to hear it today.